What a busy weekend for low Earth orbit. 3 rocket launches from 3 countries. It's today's Talkin' Science Story of the Week with Dr. Brad Tucker and me, Matt Miller.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
And Brad, our final story of the week is about a busy weekend that has just rolled past. SpaceX, Rocket Lab and Japan all launched rockets in 3 separate countries last weekend. A very busy time to be getting up into low Earth orbit.
A very busy 24 hours. And I think kind of the remarkable thing is I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've had 3 different launches within 24 hours, but definitely 3 different companies launching within 24 hours. All 3 of these were private companies doing their launches, which just goes to show how fast the industry is moved. And I think that the important or one of the more notable things about the Rocket Lab's launch was this was one that was actually delayed due to coronavirus and was scheduled to launch late April, as we covered about what some of the delays were. But now that things are reopening New Zealand, they were able to redo it. But of course, they had a weather delay on Thursday, so they had to wait.
Always the weather delay.
But it also meant that because of the weather delay, they all happen in the same 24-hour period. So, that's exciting. So there was a little bit of a benefit to this.
The silver lining. Well, the brilliant thing with the Rocket Lab's launch, and we'll talk about the other guys in a second, but Rocket Labs were carrying 5 small satellites for the US National Reconnaissance Office, NASA, and here at home, the University of South Wales had some payloads on this craft.
That's right. So M2 is a Pathfinder satellite. It was for the Australian Air Force. So UNSW Canberra built it, and then they took it to us at Mount Stromlo because we do all of the satellite testing and ready for space. And then after it was launched, there's a company in just north of Canberra called Singular Space that is built as a private ground tracking company that's doing all the data relaying and acquisitioning and tracking for it. So it's kind of, for us in Australia, it's important. It's the first time a city, different groups in a city, essentially have done every part of the satellite, from design to building to testing to ready for space and operating in space. So it's a really remarkable step in how fast the industry is moving here in Australia.
And onto SpaceX's launch, they've put another 58 Starlink satellites into orbit, but not just them on board this Falcon 9 rocket.
No, that's right. For the first time on a Starlink launch, they did some ride sharing. And ride sharing is exactly as it sounds, and it happens way more often than people imagine. And that is, you build a rocket, you put a bunch of stuff in it, and then you have room, and you kind of operate it like eBay. And you say, hey, who wants to get a lift into space? And then people bid money, and eventually you settle on a price and you FedEx your satellite to the launch pad. It's literally as simple as that. And it's all about cost. If you can take extra things into space, you're going to do that. You get a little bit of extra money. You don't waste the space, and it makes it more efficient. That's Rocket Labs' model, is ride sharing for lots of different groups. That's what they do, and that's what we saw over the weekend. SpaceX is now doing this, for obviously some of their bigger missions, but on these Starlink things, launches as well. They finally opened it up to, where possible, doing ride sharing. They launched 3 satellites for Planet Labs, so for Earth observations, for looking down on the Earth.
And that is very cool. The one thing that I was just looking at here, a stat of SpaceX launches in basically the last month. They've put 2 astronauts into orbit on the first crewed Dragon launch, but they've also put 60 Starlink satellites into orbit on June 3. So this makes over 100 satellites in less than 2 weeks, which is just incredible to think of how fast SpaceX are turning these around.
That's right. They are turning them out very fast. We just talked about a few weeks ago how they were deploying the first visor on some of these Starlink satellites. So they're definitely moving quick, and hopefully the visor technology works quite effectively.
And part of the problem with that there as well, of course, is if this technology doesn't work, they've now got over 100 satellites with a bit of defunct technology on board, and the hope of reducing their luminosity doesn't quite pan out.
Exactly, that's right. So, that is always one of the worries. And one of the things that we do in research and development is, is why you do lots of different testing and trying to make sure that before you're in full scale production or discovery or science or whatever, you're not committed to something that isn't working or exactly what you want.
And our last launch in the trio was the Interstellar Technologies Momo F5 from Japan. This one's an interesting one.
Yeah, so this is a private company based in Japan, and this rocket is what we call a sounding rocket. So it doesn't go as fully as high. It goes essentially into space, technically into what we call suborbital, and usually does launch a payload or experiment. And this was more of a test for them to try and do their final test launch to see if it's all working and going according to plan, as we talked about. Unfortunately, it didn't go fully to plan for them. They were one of the more unsuccessful ones from the weekend. But, I like highlighting it because we talk a lot about SpaceX and other companies. It's not just the US that has gone through this privatization. There's lots of other companies in those countries who are in the game as well.
And Interstellar Technologies, as the name suggests, this was Momo F5. So it's their fifth attempt at a launch. So they've done 4 before with mixed success. The third launch in May 2019 was the first to truly succeed. But unfortunately, they regressed a little bit with the fourth that fell into the ocean after an anomaly. But this is all about learning and perfecting the technologies for the future.
That's right. You have to practice. When SpaceX started this as well, there was lots of previous SpaceX failures. As again, I always like, go to YouTube and look up how to blow a rocket, I think up in 60 seconds. It's a nice, cool SpaceX video of lots of their early prototypes going boom on the launch pad.
Fantastic, Brad. Well, there's going to be more of these busy weekends in the years ahead as NASA and all those private companies ramp up. Australia's ramping up. News this week that our Mission Control Centre has been, the funding for our Mission Control Centre has been allocated. So busy times ahead, plenty of rocket launches for us to cover here on Talking Science.
That is indeed. It's going to be very busy going up there and up there.